So I'd like to welcome everybody here to another Talk at Google. With us today we have Naren Shankar, Mark Fergus, two of the showrunners for Sci-Fi's The Expanse.
Hello. Thank you.
So I'd just like to jump in and ask you guys, what do you think makes The Expanse different from other science fiction shows?
Well, the low quality of the writing on which it is based, obviously. I think everybody had kind of the same reaction to the material when we read it. It's a different look at space. It is about the small people. It's not about the admirals and the people who are in charge of starships. It's a more intimate, it's a more boots on the ground version of it. You should.
Yeah, I think again we had all responded to the same things in the novels, but we felt like sci-fi, the genre, had always skipped over the first couple of 100 years of colonization. What we consider the really interesting story is how did we claw our way off the planet? How do we get out to the moon, Mars, the solar system? How do we bringing all our demons with us, all our cultural baggage, everything, and show how we sort of forged the way to Star Trek and Galactica and all these other classic shows, like where technology kind of was sorted out, and aliens had been contacted and we were dealing with them. Like the first couple of centuries, which is, we kept thinking of it as the railroads come to America story, where the landscape changed because of technology. And let's just bring that to space. That was the fascinating story to us, and nobody had told it particularly well until we read the Expanse books. And we're like, this is the show we've always kind of wanted to see. Let's go make that show, as opposed to thousands of other properties that were really cool too. But this is the story that we've been dying to see.
It was also unique in that space was a character in the show. All of the things that people ignore usually, things like gravity and oxygen and air and like the things that were, that make space such an inhospitable environment for human life, those are kind of like, whisked away, in most shows with transporter beams and artificial gravity plating. And it's like the fact that you can have instantaneous communication anywhere across the galaxy. This show was different. It allowed us to have space become a real character dramatically in the series, and we've tried to exploit that.
Yeah, and just following up on that, space battle becomes hard and difficult the way old ship battle used to be. Submarine battle, it was slow, it was anticipated, it was like playing chess, rather than fast and instantaneous. Distances are vast, like crossing an ocean. Communication takes, you call someone on Mars and it takes a half hour to get a response, and so we're back to pre-cell phone kind of communication, not where battles and things have to happen where you don't, by the time you say something to the field of a battle, by the time it reaches you and you get a message back, the battle's over. So you have to think an entirely different way. And just, space as a character, it's vast, it's huge. The speed of light is only the speed of light. Only there's limitations that we put back on storytelling that most sci-fi says, oh, don't worry, technology solved all that. Just, the engine is dead, so everyone's still in gravity. Don't ask why. It's just part of the deal. And we're like, no, if you stop moving and your thrust is gone, you're going to start floating up, and that becomes a really cool thing to weave into the story that we get to use instead of it just brushing over it. So. And the books are full of that kind of thing. And I think that's what we responded. Like, that's a space story we haven't seen before.
And so what's it like from a creative perspective that you're writing these things? I mean, what are the challenges that you've come up with?
Ooh, so many. It's a very ambitious show. I mean, it's, but first of all of these things like zero gravity, they're traditionally not often done, and the books are full of them. It's got a very big scope. It's got a lot of different characters. The show was originally sold really, as Game of Thrones in space, and it has that quality to it. And that's certainly something that we've tried to play, but it means you've got to build a lot of big sets, you've got to create these environments, you've got to build spaceships, you've got a tremendous amount of visual effects work. It is as complex a show as I've ever been involved in.
And then there's, we had talked about it earlier too, there's things that are on the page like belters are, tall and lithe because of reduced gravity, changes the cartilage, changes the bone structure, changes the physicality of people, which we love because it's essentially technology leads to us going out into space, and as a result of that, a new race of humans is sort of created by environment. They're still human, and yet they're completely different. They can never go back to full G planets and live because their bodies have grown up. Production-wise, how are you going to get hundreds, thousands of 7 foot plus tall, very skinny, great actors as well?
The answer, of course, is money.
Right. So in the absence of that, we decided to, create the full spectrum of this. This was an adaptation problem. It's on the page. It says it's easy to say everybody looks like this on the screen. Unless we're an animated film, we have to do this in a smart way. So it ended up becoming a great opportunity to say, yes, there are extreme belters with the full range of physicality. In essence, the poorer you were, the more difficult your economic upbringing. You were on 0G ships, you were way out in the system. The more difficult your economic situation is, the more belter you would be because you'd be in harder conditions. And we did the full spectrum, so you could have race traders, you could have people hiding, pretending they're an earther when they're actually a belter. You can have extreme belters who are looked down on. You have earthers slumming it, wanting to pretend they're belters. You have a whole range of stuff now. We can put that in the story as opposed to that monolithic kind of, Ty had always called it the thing of a lot of sci-fi. A race of people looks the same, they speak the same, they have the same attitudes about everything. They're a race, and that wouldn't, I feel like for this show that would have gotten boring really quickly. So I'm glad that we had the constraint because it came to I think a cooler solution.
Definitely.
So for those who may not know, Ty Frank and Daniel Abraham, the authors who combined to make the pen name James S.A. Corey, have a sort of unprecedented level of participation in the creation of the show. And what's that like for you to work with the authors, to have them with you at all times?
When I was brought onto the show, Mark and his writing partner, Osby, they wrote the pilot, and I was brought in later, and after it was sold to Sci-Fi. And I was told, oh, you're going to start the show, and here we go, and we're going to go to series. And by the way, the 2 writers who wrote the books are going to be in the room. And I was, are you sure that's a really good idea? Because usually, authors can be very precious with what they've written. They don't want to change anything. But very quickly, we found that Ty and Daniel were incredibly open to truly adapting the material to a different medium. It's like, things that they do in the book would not have lent themselves to the story the way we're portraying it dramatically on television. They would have, the first book is 2 characters. It's told from 2 perspectives. The chapters alternate between them. We had to bring in other elements to the show, and so they were incredibly open to it, and we actually started pulling in material that they had written. They'd written novellas to support the material, and we started bringing those in, characters from books further along in the series, and what it enabled us to do was truly adapt the material. It's a slightly different thing, but it's remained incredibly true to the source material all along the way. And with Ty and Daniel there, we don't break anything. It's that, there have been times when we'll go, oh, what if we do this? And they're like, well, you're going to entirely ruin book 5. And we're like, okay, we won't do that then. And so we figure out a different way around it. And it also, at times, we'll be looking for, well, gee, can we do something in this episode that illuminates a part of belter culture? It's like, if only we had something. And Ty will say, well, what if you did this thing that I've got, 3 books down the line? We're like, that's perfect. Just put that in. And so they allow us to stay on target. They exploit the scope of the world that they've created, and we're just the beneficiaries of that.
Yeah.
So, just a more lighthearted question. If you were to pick a faction for yourselves, would you be Earthers, Martians, or Belters?
I think the Belters are really what the books are about ultimately. I think I feel like definitely, because that's where all the drama is going on, that's where all the passion in the story is. They're the scattered tribes of people flung out into the solar system trying to figure out, some identity for themselves to collect together, to stay as tribes, to survive out their new environment. You got the empires fighting over who's going to be the top dog, and of course the Belters are at the shit end of that usually. The people who built the sort of apparatus for the empires to exist out in the solar system then become exiles out in space, and they're forgotten. And that's where all the really cool grist is, I think, in this story. And I think they're also the coolest and the most interesting people in this story. The Earth is like, it's the old new empire, old empire thing, which I think human behavior seems to always go that way anyway. So one of the things we loved about the stories too, it's just the endless cycle of rising and falling and building, and oppressed class empire leading to crusty old empire that falls into the sea. The other one becomes the crusty old. It's just kind of the way we're wired to. And the story, kind of on a larger sense, says what happens. Is there any way out of that cycle? Is there any technological or spiritual way out of that endless cycle? So, short answer to the question is Belters. I think I wandered from which I will do. You just gotta go, get back.
As a humorless technologist, I'd probably be a Martian.
Yeah, I've definitely noticed from the fans that even though the Martians haven't appeared so much in season 1, a lot of people really like the idea of having the sleek ships and the big guns.
They got the cool stuff.
They do. They have the cool stuff.
Of
Belters
course,
have rocks.
Yeah, well, that works too under the right circumstances.
That's right.
And cargo containers with engines.
Exactly.
I mean,
Spoiler alert.
I'm a little partial to the Belters myself, but
Understandably.
yeah, I mean, it's because I'm over 6 feet tall.
You made the language too.
That's true.
So, I mean, you have a PhD in physics and engineering.
I do.
Can you tell us a little about your story going from that to, Hollywood?
I had kind of an odd trajectory. I started as a humanities student in medieval studies or
Gasp and Google.
Yeah, I know. Medieval studies, French literature, but I'd always loved science and mathematics, and I think in my sophomore year I realized that the chance of actually getting a job with the degrees that I was looking at were probably quite slim. So I transferred into engineering, and it's also cultural. It's like first generation Indian is like doctor, lawyer, businessman, engineer. That's sort of like what you got to do, and so I transferred into engineering, and I stayed all the way through to my PhD. But as I was finishing my dissertation, I started. I mean, the things that I loved were history, and so I started taking more and more courses in the liberal arts college, and I think it just got to the point where I had that moment where I was coming out. I was taking a course in the history of American foreign policy, taught by this amazing professor at Cornell, and I came out of this terrific lecture about Aaron Burr, and I was walking back to my lab, and I could see it sort of down at the end of the street, and I was like, oh my God, I can't do this anymore. and it was not that I didn't love engineering. I did. It was I kind of felt myself becoming more and more of a specialist in a smaller and smaller corner of the universe, and that just wasn't my personality. And I finished the dissertation, and I told my parents that I was going to go to Los Angeles and be a writer. And to their credit, my parents were adorable. They were very supportive, and I'd started college really young, and so they figured I had a couple of years to burn. And I drove, and I'd come to my senses and then get a real job. But as I was driving away, 10 years later, my mother told me as soon as my car went out of sight, she burst into tears. But it worked out okay. So that's the long story.
Well, and I've heard a story about tied into why you were graduating from college young, and that you were a little bit ahead, and you had a briefcase.
God damn it, Ty. This is, yes, I own this story. When I was in like 6th grade, my parents, who were immigrants, they thought it would be awesome to give their son a briefcase to take to school. And like a good son, I took it to school for like the next 4 years. And let me tell you, that was a chick magnet, a briefcase. No, I had a good friend who actually, every day we would come back from school, he would kick the shit out of the briefcase. And then like in my sophomore year of high school, it exploded. And just everything went all over the snow, and it was just like done with the briefcase.
No more briefcases.
No more briefcases.
No.
That's what I'm just picturing it.
It's so sad.
Well, I mean, I wonder if any of those people who tormented you are watching your shows. I mean, you probably have some fans who don't even make the connection.
Yeah, screw those guys. I hope they are.
Yeah. So I'd like to give everybody time to think about their questions. We're setting up a mic over here, and make sure that when you line up, that you are lined up behind each other. I'm a linguist and I can't talk.
How's that happen?
I know. Well, this is why you guys had to hire a voice coach, and you couldn't just have me work with the actors. I mean, I would go in there and I would just mess up my own language.
That was fun. Mark did a lot of that with the voice acting and the coaching of the Belters.
Yeah, well, it's
really,
funny. I worked for an entire year on a show where Nick created an entire language for the Belters, and we probably have worked countless hours. I met you. I literally met him for the first time 2 days ago and spoke to him for the first time, even though we did a show together.
Yeah.
That's how. So, but yeah, it would be lines going to Nick. He would create the language. Then it would come back. We would bring him to our dialect coach. Essentially, he would teach people how to act and say and inflect and all that. A completely created language with a very specific accent. And you know, some actors dove into that. Other actors were terrified to, not only learn your lines and feel it and swim in it and get all the subtext, but also learn a new language and a new accent now and be ready tomorrow. It was a little frightening, but
it was a great thing in the show too, because it was one of the things in the book was like, humanity had gone out into the belt. It wasn't just white Americans, going out into space. It was the Russians, the Chinese, the Indians, and so the belt was this polyglot mix of different cultures and language styles and little pieces of them. And the Martians have different sort of strains in their language as well. And it's just been a really interesting thing because when you start feeling those little threads, you start feeling those little bits and pieces of human culture in this different place. It was just a unique thing in the show that I really like. I really loved it.
It was cool. I don't know who it was, the ties or your analogy of the the Mediterranean fishing village where like if the space is just considered all these different factions coming to work in space and coming, going, transporting to this, and what happens to language and culture over hundreds of years in that kind of transitory environment. And that's sort of where the language came from. And it was great because we could sort of do anything we wanted with it, but we wanted to stick to structure and rules so it didn't feel like bull,
Yeah.
It felt like a real language with a history and a structure.
And even the gestures.
It
was like that was, it's described as a gestural language, and Ty and Daniel are saying that it was derived from people in spacesuits who spoke different languages not being able to talk to one another. So they had adopted some very, broad signaling, gestural signaling with their hands so that they could look at each other in space and understand it. And over time, that concept had boiled down into a very expressive hand gestures along with Belter. And so that was part of it as well. And it was just, it's lovely when you can pull details like that into a show because it just grounds the world. It makes it all feel very real.
So thank you for that.
So you touched on this a little bit, talking about the Belter's height and stuff and having to change a little bit from the books. But I had a question about like doing practical effects for the low gravity areas like Ceres, because you have the drones flying around in the shots, and I haven't finished the show, so maybe there's something like this in a later episode. But showing somebody picking up something impractically heavy or having an occasional object not fall as fast as you would expect or anything like that, because it's a little off-putting for them to be talking about how it's low gravity and then everything's like heavy.
We had to choose. I think we had to create. We had talked about this earlier as well. Ceres is like a third G environment, and we it would affect lots of areas of behavior how Earthers would walk and be too ahead of themselves. They'd be jumping all the time, objects falling. I think what we tried to do is, tell the story, make sure that people understood this is not normal gravity, but then don't let it get in the way of every scene. Otherwise, you just can't tell the story. And so we picked things like a
budget.
bird
I realize
flapping
you can't
its
put
wings.
everybody on
I'm sorry,
vomit.
what was that?
I was going to say, I realize you don't have the budget to like film every episode on the vomit comet or something.
No.
And even so, it would be.
The thing that when we talked about it, it was ultimately those things would get normalized out very quickly, and series would be like, even though everything was maybe not as heavy as a similar object would be on Earth, relative to series, everything would be accounted for. So the number of times that you can actually show differences were actually fairly small, because it's hard. How do you show weight on television? It's very tough. So what we did is we picked a couple of things. Coriolis is one of them, in that in different parts of the station, if you pour a fluid, the deflection of the fluid relative to where you are in the station and the spin gravity causes it to deflect. So you see that when Miller's pouring from his Scotch bottle, instead of going like this, it goes like that into the glass. When you see a bird, the sparrow that he flips a little peanut to or whatever on his balcony, that bird was meticulously animated so that it was a sparrow. The beating of the wings is a little bit different than it would be on Earth. So the smaller moments where you can establish a different gravity situation were more effective. We tried, and one thing we completely failed at doing, there are two things we failed at doing in the pilot, was a bicycle stunt. Oh my God, what a nightmare. In the pilot to try to show a reduced gravity flip. It was misconceived. The director hated it. We made him shoot it. We spent half a fucking day. Then a day, and we cut it out of the pilot entirely.
Yeah.
The other one.
Didn't work.
We had one scene that we could never make work because we all thought was comical. Was Miller has an Earth partner who's come to Sirius for the first time, and we thought it would be interesting. Like there's a chase. To do a chase, and the Earth guy, because he hasn't quite acclimated to Ceres, he runs so hard that he kind of like he goes up. He actually, because he's much stronger, he's like sort of like a Superman kind of a jump. And we wrote it into the script a couple times, and the director was just going to go, guys, it's going to look stupid.
That's the thing. If it doesn't feel like part of the show, it'll just look like the guy's an idiot, and the bike trick looked like a stupid bike trick on Earth.
In that case, we were idiots.
Yeah. But the bird, you see the wings flapping, a third of the amount of time, and the bird kind of hovering aloft. It's one way to, in Coriolis, there's a few things that actually landed, and hopefully we paint enough points that you realize the whole environment, but use ones that are visual and distinctive.
One that worked really well was, this is towards the end of the season, is one of our characters, they're trying to get out of a station, an asteroid station. They're not sure which direction they're going, and so she takes a little bit of dust and she drops it. And by the way it spins, she understands which way they're moving, spinward or anti-spinward on the station. And so she's able to actually understand where she is relative to that. And it's not commented on at all. I mean, it just exists there, and so it's kind of it's an interesting moment.
So I realize that you don't really have a chance to know like how far out the show is going to keep going.
Forever.
Yeah. Well, that would be great because I'm really enjoying it. But I'm curious, sort of how you structure things in terms of like, okay, this is where we're at. This is where the books are going. This is where we want to end the season, which may or may not coincide, directly with the end of the book. And thinking like how far ahead do you think on that stuff? I know you've been picked up for the second season, and the books obviously are going on for a while, and there's more books planned. And so I'm really curious how the structure of the TV seasons and the structure of the books are combined in a show running sense. Because
I mean, we're just sort of going with our gut in terms of what each season needs to be a complete experience, a complete story. Like a 10-hour or 13-hour movie with its own structure, then we fit that into a larger structure of seasons. I think we're just going toward what is the next big evolution of the story. It doesn't always coincide with the books because we don't have to, it's crazy to go as fast as the books, to cram it in. We'd be losing so much great material. So one of the things, you know, we had to learn, Hawk and I, from Naren, is slow down. Stop burning through the story. Stop trying to get to a fixed point, because the book did, and you're gonna have to blow past all this amazing stuff to get to a point. So I think we've adjusted our pace to learn, like, tell the story, bring the novellas in, bring characters, so let the thing evolve at its own pace, and, you know, each big chunk of it, if we're lucky enough to keep going, we'll just find the next great sort of turning point, and the next great, you know, the first season, we would have ideally loved to get through the first book. It wasn't feasible for a lot of reasons, and not even advisable. So we picked a great turning point of the book to be the season end, and we could get there at a pace that was appropriate. So it's kind of a hard question to answer, but every block needs to feel like, I always think of it as to feel like its own contained, awesome unit, a season. Whether or not you get a next one, you end on a really amazing point that feels like the characters have evolved, the story has evolved, we've opened up the universe that much more, and then hopefully we'll be back to fill in more stuff.
In both season 1 and season 2, we started the year by a few weeks of just discussion, really, about what that very broad structure of the show was. And season 1 was 10 episodes, season 2 is going to be 13. You have these books that have a really strong, well-delineated plot framework. And so there's probably several points in book 1 that we could have chosen to end the season at. We picked one in particular. And the same thing is happening, as we're going into book 2. But what you get is, once you understand what the pace of the show is, once you get a broad idea of where you kind of want to go, it starts to lay down, and you start to see sort of like episodically what the events are. And yeah, we're very tightly arced, and we're tightly serialized, so you can watch the whole thing through and it's telling you a story. But if you watch the individual episodes, there's usually some sense of completeness episodically. And so those first few weeks of the season is where you kind of really talk that stuff through, and you get pretty quickly you get to an understanding of how the season wants to lay itself down, and the story that you want to tell. It's usually there. You just have to find it. And I think that we've been, when we come into the season, it's like, somebody will say, well, hey, what if we ended it here? And everybody's like, that's a great place to end it. And it just seems very natural.
Yeah.
And so I think that's at least our plan going forward, to continue that.
I thought where you chose to end the first season was a good stopping point. I thought
Nice.
that worked.
All right.
That
thank
worked
you.
well as far as I was
Thank you.
concerned. So.
Thanks.
We had some arguments with the network about that.
Yeah.
The funny thing is, when I got the ebook for Leviathan Wakes, the first book, it came packaged with one of Daniel's other books, from his fantasy series.
Yeah.
And so I knew that at some point, this book was not like 900 pages long, so it had to end it, but I didn't know quite where it was in the page count.
Yeah.
And actually, as I was reading it, that felt like, I thought, okay, pretty soon, the Daniel's fantasy book is about to start. And I'm like, oh wait, no, there's a much longer.
There's a bunch of spots.
There's a
like
coda
that.
here.
A couple of things. One is I was really impressed with the casualness with which Miller particularly operated his various bits of media technology. It was a kind of a studied casualness. I really haven't seen that in a sci-fi show before. The other two things. One is I noticed a lot of the sci-fi set dressing has we'd say elements of contemporary technology in it, flat screens and so forth.
Yep.
And I'm wondering, is that just part of the hurdle to get a show done, that you don't try to do one-off special versions of everything? It's like, well, that'll be fine for this milieu, or if it was more of an aesthetic choice. And the other question, which is a little more involved, is right now you guys are funded by a kind of a large television network, but you were saying you'd like to have this go on forever, but you're kind of living and dying at the whim of Sci-Fi or some other network type organization. Do you see a show of this kind of scope becoming something that could be produced as an internet-only show over time?
Internet-only show? You mean like a Netflix show?
Like a fan-funded. For example,
fan-funded?
Well, for
That's
example,
a lot of fans.
I purchased your
funding.
show
Yeah.
directly off of whatever Amazon.
Yeah.
Right. Don't have to watch commercials. I've got a little bit more money than free time, so I do it that way. And I'm wondering if if you see that kind of thing happening enough to where the economics would work out that you could produce without this sort of large advertiser-driven business.
If somebody asked me that question outside of this place, I would say, go ask Google. Because I suspect you have far better metrics on that than I do. But
Asking for your gut, man.
I mean, it's a good question. The business is going over the top in so many different ways. I mean, Netflix has clearly shown that there is a subscriber-driven basis to make high-quality entertainment. So fan funding is another thing entirely. I don't know what like the most expensive fan-funded
Maybe that's a
type of
poor
deal.
choice of words,
Yeah.
but consumer funded would be another way. It's like,
It's-
I want to watch
it's
it,
a
I'll pay
very-
you some money to see
Listen,
it.
you're asking a really interesting question. It's a very interesting model. And I think that probably it's partially dependent on discovery and targeting. Because I think that for this type of show, if the fans were given that option and you were able to reach all of them, could each person put $2.50 in an episode that you're buying a latte at Starbucks every day to watch that? The answer is probably yes. But can you drive that kind of money to the show? That's another question entirely. I don't know. With regard to the stuff,
Just as like
the props and stuff.
the actual set dressing.
I think it's a bit of
It's a
both.
bit of both,
I mean,
yeah.
there was need. I mean, that to create these one-off objects. I mean, incredibly expensive, incredibly time-consuming. So some of it had to be done a little more, broad because we had so much of that everywhere. But also, I think aesthetically,
we're a little retro too.
Yeah,
we're a little
bit-
retro.
bit
We're a little
retro,
bit. That's aesthetic.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the idea that, to make a statement about technology, that's why we bashed up Miller's screen to have a big
It
crack
was nice.
in
You
the
got a
middle.
nice crack. And
We're like, there's only two, technology, rises and eats us story, or technology saves us. Tech and sci-fi is always, it's one of the two. It's a paradise, or it rises up and robots kill us all. And what I loved about the books, they're like, who cares? Technology is there. It's awesome. It's in the background. Human behavior is still. It didn't save us. It didn't eat us. It's there, and it didn't really solve our problems. But there's tons of advanced tech in these books. It's mentioned when it's interesting or when it matters to the story. And weirdly, it feels like they've ignored it, and it's just no. They put it in its place, which is it's in the background. Who cares? And I love that about the books. That it's not about will technology destroy us? Will it save us? It's like kind of neither. We're still people. We're still out there fumbling around trying to figure out the human condition kind of crap. And technology is there, and it exists. And the way you had always tell them that your car analogy about
I stole that analogy from Ty.
Then,
Yeah.
all right, well, you don't get in your car and say what an amazing transportation apparatus this is.
I am a fan of the internal combustion
Right.
engine. It's like, no,
Yeah.
it's like nobody says
So-
it.
And they put tech in the books on that par. There's amazing medical advancements in the books. There's amazing robotics, AI, everything. It's just it's so in the background because it's just part of normal life now. So to make the stories about that would kill what's.
There's a show I won't name that it was a broadcast show, but it had a whole scene where it was like about a drone that took your garbage out from your kitchen to the driveway. It was so ridiculous. And it's like, that's the whole scene. It's like technology in our world has gone into the background. And you made the comments about Miller gesturing with and how fluid it was. What we told the actors was, do whatever you want, because the idea was that the technology would respond to you. You don't have to make a specific gesture, that things are listening to you and watching you and understanding you in context. So when there's this beautiful scene in episode 5 where Miller is manipulating a star map, and it's really gorgeous, Thomas Jane did whatever he wanted to. And he was doing deliberate things, but then our animators animated to it. So it wasn't, and nothing was choreographed. He simply just did what he felt was right. He understood the moments in the script because they were scripted. But the actual visual effect was created to match his movement, and that's why it feels very real.
Hey guys, thanks a lot for coming out today. Naren, if it makes you feel any better, I didn't have a briefcase, but I had one of those rolling
Right?
backpacks.
You know what I'm talking about? Yeah.
I got
yeah.
the crap beat out of me. Yeah.
And that was, I'm a little older, so that's like, we didn't
Generational
have
thing,
that.
yeah.
No technology.
No wheels then, not for the children.
But guys, I have a question more on the writing side. I'm curious to hear from you how much actors kind of had an influence on the writings.
As
Obviously,
little as possible.
one can hope. But I mean, obviously, there's a character arc. You have to follow story arc for every character, and the books give you guidance. But after kind of seeing what the actors could do, how much did that influence your writing based on their qualities and limitations?
I mean, certainly once the actors start to own the character and you get tuned to their rhythm and you see the way they're burrowing in, what they resist, what they really unlocks their inner greatness. You start to see what works for them, and Thomas Jane, for example, like he's a very emotional actor, but he plays it. The emotions bubbling under the surface. If you give him an opportunity to that, he sinks his teeth into a scene. If you want him to play overtly emotional and weepy and over the top, like that shuts him down, because it's not how it doesn't really tap into what he's great at. So it's our job to not to change the story based on everybody's ideas, because then you have chaos, but to listen to what's working, to really start shaping it for that actor. And then listening, they start to have ownership over these people, and they start saying, hey, you know what, I'm a little uncomfortable with this moment or whatever, and then make them feel safe to be able to bring their thoughts and ideas and keep it open like that. So it ended up working both ways, but we try to really commit to story choices and not, but then the texture of it, the way into it, a line, I think we've been really happy to, the more it engages them, the more we want to hear from them, and it's been a really great relationship. So
We also, in our process, just the way we develop the season, we have a lot of material at the script stage going into a season. And so the actors get big chunks of material at a time. And when they are able to read it, when they see it stretched out over a story arc or a character arc over several episodes, I think it gives them a lot of confidence that the people who are writing the material know where they're going. And actors get concerned when they feel like things are happening at random or for no reason or capriciously or arbitrarily. It's like, that's when they get weird. But when they see that the story is actually happening and there's meaning behind what they're doing, then they get comfortable. And our guys, that's been our experience. They will chime in. Things get shaded a little differently. There's an interpretation that maybe we didn't see that we're certainly happy to dig into. But by and large, they've stayed on the page.
yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
So I really enjoyed the first season, and I got a ton of questions, but I think I narrowed it to two. One of them is about the whole treatment of sound in space. I'm just curious how you guys feel about it, because this right now we're seeing a lot of people like going for the soundless effect, and I appreciate both versions. They're a lot in the right context. But I was just wondering what you guys had thoughts about that.
Yeah,
I have to tell this story.
yeah.
This is, well,
Please.
we talked about.
Let's put it this way: this has been a very important decision and an important discussion. So it was not made.
No, it was not made lightly.
Lightly, yeah.
And couple of things. Every show has done things a little bit differently. Like Galactica, for example, they kind of took a muffled soundscape in space, and so they kind of crunched things down a little bit sonically. It was interesting. When we started developing the sound design for the show, we had some guys who were like, we really want to, we use these contact mics on things, and they were like hitting things, and because wanted to sound like, the astronauts in their suits on the ISS, and it's like, oh wow, isn't that going to be really neat and everything? And so they did all of this work, and they put these sounds in the show, and we're watching, and we go, that sucks. It's like you have people walking down a creepy corridor, and you're hearing something that goes like, doom, 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 doom. It just sounds like they're stepping on plastic. And so there's no tension, there was no scare. And so even though that was the real sound of what was happening and probably what would be conducted through your spacesuit when you're hitting something, in a vacuum, it didn't matter. What it was doing was dramatically, it was ruining the goddamn moment. Yeah. And so what happened was we made the decision that to go big, to go gut-wrenching and, things that are moving fast and have a tremendous amount of mass, make them feel big and heavy and fast and scary. It's an aesthetic choice. I mean, we would sit in the mixes and I'd be going, scared the shit out of me. It's like turn the thing up. And it's half of what you perceive as entertainment, is sound. It's like, it's an incredibly important element to it. And they've done tests where they'll show audiences the exact same film. In one version is a crappy mix, and the second version is an amazing mix. And the perception from the audience is that the one with the good mix has a better picture. And that is it's an amazing thing. It's just how we perceive the world. So, and the story I like to tell is that years ago I was doing a show called The Outer Limits, and it was an anthology science fiction show, and we were filming in a cave. I mean, it's like we were doing a cave set, and there's lights, and I was going, oh my God, where do these lights come from? It's in the cave. This is dark. And the DP on the show told me this story about an old movie, it's the 50s, James Mason, Journey to the Center of the Earth. The director had like a breakdown during the filming because he suddenly realized, oh my God, we're inside the Earth. Where's the light coming from? And he's freaking out. And the DP goes, it's coming from the same place as the music.
Yeah, that's it. Absolutely.
I like it. Cool.
Yeah, sound is like I think sound is the language of the subconscious, the heart. It is so much more primal than visual and any other element that we got going. And to leave that off the palette to tell your story, it's not realistic, and it's one of those things you have to let go because we're telling a story here, and we're taking so many of our colors away, and the subconscious stuff that makes you see differently because you're hearing differently. To lose that is hobbling everything we're trying to do. So you just got to say screw it, and yeah.
Well, and just to insert a comment on that, certainly with the language part, I mean, there's nothing so viscerally foreign as hearing a language that you don't understand.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because, there's just some deep parts of your brain that are so keyed into that.
Yeah, it's why music can wreck you, It's like a great song, or a song that brings you back to your childhood, or a song that hits the right, it holds and then it lets go, and you feel like you're gonna weep. Like, no one can figure that out, but it's
the lizard part of your brain.
It is, and
it's like,
you gotta grab every bit of that in a box that we have 42 minutes to tell a story with all these elements. Sound is so important. So I appreciate the question, because it's one of those ones that we really did not. We're a science-based show that we tried to.
We really did try.
You guys got a lot of good details
That
going.
one, screw it.
Sucked
Too
so
bad.
bad. It was so bad.
I liked it though. Thanks. The second question is, between how you have a book series going on and you have a television series, so you got these two separate things, and you do, book television often will take some liberties from the books, but is there any moment where you feel like, oh, I just want to take the lead now? Like, do you ever think it catches up, kind of like the Marvel universe, how the movies are now influencing the comics more?
Yeah.
Do you think I know the authors may have rights to all this, but do you ever think like, I got an idea for this, how it should go?
I don't know. I think that the problem is when you take it out of, the imagination and you put it onto film, you're stuck with those faces. You're stuck with that world. And I mean, that's really a question for Ty and Daniel, because they're the ones who are writing the books. And it's like, I would
We're not going
say,
to catch up anytime soon.
no, we're not going to catch up. But it's an interesting question. I would, you need to send it to them. It's like, are they being influenced on the writing side, novelistically, by what they're seeing in the television show? It's, and I don't know what the answer is.
Yeah.
I mean, we're following their lead, and we're trying not to change too much. We're trying to stay real faithful and make it a real true adaptation of what they've written. But I think it may be inevitable to have some crosstalk.
Yeah, I wonder if they can, just the visuals of the actors we've chosen who really own, Naomi Nagata was very specifically described in the book, and our actress Dominique played exactly what's on the page, except she flipped all she put all the pain inside instead of wearing it on her sleeve, and the character in the book more wore her, she would shut down, she would hide, and Dominique doesn't do that, but you can tell there's a ton of pain and anxiety and joy and everything else going on underneath, but she lets it out in a tough kind of way, and I don't know how you cannot get infected with her version of the character writing her forward. I don't know how if those guys get tainted by that or affected by that, but we're certainly we'll have to read the new books and see if we're having any effect.
Cool, thank you.
So we have time for one last quick question.
That's pretty quick, but thank you for coming, first of all.
Thank you.
When I saw your pilot, the sort of sci-fi geek side of me said, what technological advancement happened in the history of the show that allowed so many people and so much material to get up into orbit? And did you guys talk about that? Is it what?
Yeah,
how do you explain
absolutely.
it? What was your idea on that?
It's not my idea. It's Tyne Daniel's idea. It's a fusion drive. It's an efficient fusion drive that allows colonization of the solar system and really compresses the time it takes to get to Mars, the belt, and to the planets. That's really it. And everything kind of stems from it. And they wrote a lovely novella called Drive about the discovery of that what's called the Epstein drive. Is Solomon Epstein the guy who finds it? And we're actually finding a way to incorporate that story into season 2. So
Excellent.
you'll actually get a nice little explanation.
That would be very satisfying.
It will.
Intellectually.
I think it will actually. It's because it really is one of my favorites of the novellas.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Cool.
Very, very last.
Well, thank you very much for coming. I love your story about coming from a science background. But my question is that when you have such an enormous power to reach to the public by your writing and putting it on a TV series, do you, with a subject that is futuristic and of course involves a lot of technology and science, do you feel, and given that this is a hot topic these days among the scientific communities, whether they, film and TV series can be a tool for enhancing public understanding of science and so on. For this particular show, have you come across the debate whether we should have science advisors on the team or whether this is a good place for enhancing public understanding of science, or how would that affect our rating or the type of audience in terms of demographics? And I understand, I haven't watched the show, but I understand that technology is in the background and it's not the main purpose of the show, but have you had any talk about it or discussion that how would that affect the ratings or like the audience and possibly the collaborations?
I think
of
audiences
the
have
scientific communities?
loved the, and when I say tech is in the background, I mean, the idea that, we'd be focusing on robotics and whatever, but what people have been really responding to is the science of what happens to the human body when you go really fast across space. You have the ability to do it. The only problem is the human body can't withstand it, so you have to go through a very painful drug regimen to convince your body not to die while you're going 20 Gs for and then the ship will flip halfway through the journey and start burning in the opposite direction, which is it will break for half the journey as it's sped up. Like, people are loving the mechanics of travel, that we're showing how this might feasibly get a ship of massive mass and density across a huge ocean of space, and we're showing you kind of how it gets done, and we're showing how gravity, when thrust stops, or your directionality, if people are standing in the ceiling if their engine's over here, and we're showing how directionality in sci-fi is all wrong, and when you stop thrust or acceleration, you lose gravity. All that stuff people are digging that about the show, so I think we're seeing tons of reaction in the public to how cool is that, so we feel like it's really distinguishing the show as becoming a hindrance in any way.
It is in this with these novels, Tyne Daniel, they really did a tremendous amount of research, and they put a lot of science into the books already. And so what was great about it was they found ways to express that science in dramatically interesting ways. And so that's what we're doing in the show. So we don't have a science advisor around because generally we don't really need one. I mean, I had science advisors and technical advisors on CSI, but that's, that was a forensic show, and it was like, that was incredibly important for that. But here, the situations and the problems that come up are already well thought through. We did an episode where we have two of our characters running across a catwalk towards to try to escape, and in the middle of their run, the ship's main engine goes out, and so they lose gravity. And as they're running, their momentum carries them up into the air. And the only way they can get back is one of the guys clips a tether onto the other person, flips around as they're floating up, pushes her up, which pushes him down, slams him back on the catwalk, he attaches to it, and then that allows him to come back. It's a beautiful illustration of the third law. But we don't say we're going to teach you about action and reaction. But it's really interesting. But that's how we're doing science in the show. There's another sequence in that same episode actually, where our people are in a compartment, and the gravity goes out again, thrust goes out, and a railgun shot comes through the cabin instantaneously and basically vaporizes a guy's head. And so the air rushes out of the cabin, the guy's still bleeding in zero gravity, so the blood forms like this little blood head over where his, where his real head was. They shut off, they finally seal the compartment in zero G, the gravity comes back on, and then the blood head goes, and it just splashes on the ground. Somebody on one website did a whole calculation. They did a mass flow calculation, and the whole thing said, well, we got it pretty right. We're off by about 20%. It's like, okay, 20% drama means like 100% right. So it's but that's the fun of the show, is that you're showing science in a dramatic way without really. We're not teaching. It's not school. It's not a textbook, but people are really responding to, as Mark said, is that they understand it because it feels real, and they're seeing something that's being portrayed in a way they really haven't before. And I think in that respect, it's really nice to be able to do that in the show, because you're expressing science. You may not be teaching it, but you're kind of being faithful to it.
Thank you.
Well, thank you guys for coming and giving us this wonderful discussion.
Thanks,
Our
Nick.
pleasure.
Thank you.